Okay, this video is going to show you how to create a database driven website because it's something that I've had requests for a few times by some of my students now. This will probably take about an hour, this video, and I will be working at my usual pace rather than my teaching pace, but I will explain things as I go along. So hopefully you may have to pause and rewind and look through the video more than once, but you should hopefully get everything you need to build the basic structure for a database driven website. So without further ado, I'm going to create a new project in Visual Studio 2010 first of all. It's going to be an ASP.NET empty web application, which can be found under web and then empty web application. I'm going to call this one database driven website. Nice and easy. And what we're going to do, we're going to build this in a proper architectural sound way, if you like. We're going to use something called the N-tier architecture, which means that we're going to have all of the database connectivity as a separate file, a separate project. That way you can actually do things in the future to make it more flexible. But first of all, we're going to build the basic structure for our actual website. So I'm going to right click first of all my database driven website project, and I'm going to first of all add a folder, and this folder is going to be called style because that's where I'm going to store a style sheet. Within that I'm then going to add new item, and I'm going to add my style sheet, and I'm going to call this one main.css. I'm going to want every page of my website to look the same, so I'm going to use a master page setup. So I'm going to create a new master page. This will allow me to create a structure. Again, I'm going to call this main.master. This will give me a structure for my website which I can then use on multiple pages. Now to add a new page, which is the first thing we're going to do, I'm going to use a standard setup for the master page. I'm not going to change anything. Basically the main content for a page will appear, that changes per page is only going to appear once, and that will be within this section here. It may be there are two sections of your page you need to change information on every page, but I'm just going to say that the main body section of my website is the only bit that's going to change from page to page. So I'm not going to make any changes to this main.master yet. To add a new page that uses this master reference, you select web form using master page and give it a name. Now the first page of any website needs to be called default.aspx, so that's the first page I'm going to use, and of course it's going to use the main.master style. Now you can see the content is literally just has these two sections called content placeholders. This is the page data. I'm just going to write in my default, and if I actually run this website now, you'll see that it is just a white screen at the moment with the words "this is the page data" being pulled up. Your website will not run unless you have a ASPX page, so you need to put an ASPX page in before you can run the website. The master page is then dragged from its source, stuck onto the default.aspx page before it's then blasted out to the browser, and as you will see as it loads up, it's just a single white page. This is the page data. So first thing we're going to do with our database driven website is make it look like a professional style website. So I'm going to start by going to the master page. I'm going to click and drag from Solution Explorer where it says main.css, and let go just within this header section, and you can see Visual Studio creates a reference to that style sheet without me having to do anything. I'm going to put the title in my website, so that will appear on the tab. Make sure you save at every stage. So what's the structure of my website going to actually look like? Well, I'm going to first take this div tag that's after form 1 and give it the tag main data. You can call it anything you like, but I'm going to call mine main data. And then I'm going to have a standard layout, which means I'm going to have a header, a menu, content. Now for the content, I'm going to take this closing div tag and move it beneath the content placeholder, and then finally just copy that one in again. I'm going to put in a footer as well. So it's very straightforward. All of this is within the main data div. So I've got a header, menu, content and footer. To set the styles for all of this, obviously you're going to use the main.css, and you must make sure obviously you put the hash in before, because you're talking about ID tags. If you want to, you can right click on the master page, use a vertical tab group. I'm going to close Solution Explorer, and then I can see both my CSS and master page at the same time. So I've got my main data item, I then have my header item, I'm going to have a menu item, content. Now keep the current, that's because I'm recording a video, it does this so often. Can't cope with doing everything at once. So now we're going to put in some styles. Well, first of all, my body. I don't like the Times New Roman font, so I'm going to start with my font family. I'm going to use Calibri as my main font, Verdana as a backup, and then obviously sans serif at the end. And font size I'm going to have set to 12 point. I always use points rather than pixels because you don't know what resolution the person's screen is going to be. I'm going to build this as a standard fixed width website that is always centered to the page. So the way that we do that is say position relative first of all. On the main data we then have to set a width, and I'm going to set mine to a standard 1000 pixels. I'm then going to set my margins to auto. To check, what I'm going to do, I'm going to set my background colour on my body to a nice grey that I quite like. It's almost white, it's only a very off colour, background colour, and then on my actual main data I'm going to set the colour currently to white. So we're going to save that and just play it just to see what that looks like. As I say, I'm doing this from memory, so things may go wrong as I'm doing it, and I shall correct it as I go along. But as you can see now, I've got a grey background, and I've got a nice white centre section which shows that my website is centred and all the page data is within it. So we're doing well so far. That's how we want it to look so far. So my header, I'm going to set the width obviously to be 100%, and I'll show you two different styles as I go through. This first one is going to be where the menu is directly below the header. Just remembered I've left off the footer. There I am saying that I might make mistakes. Well, there's the first one. So the width of the header is going to be 100% of main data, so it will also be 1000 pixels. The reason I'm using 100% and not number of pixels is because I'm going to actually change main data possibly in the future, and I want everything to change alongside it. So this one I'm going to have a height of 100 pixels. It doesn't need to be particularly height, and my background colour on this one is actually going to be quite a light blue. Which is AAAAFF. That's I think about the sort of colour I'm after. I'm then going to do the same thing with my menu. So width is going to be again 100%. The menu height this time is only going to be 40 pixels because all it's going to contain is some text. And the background colour for this one I'm actually going to set as being white for now. I might change that again in the future. Content again is width 100%. The background colour for this one, just so that you can see it on the screen at the moment, and I'm not going to set a height on this one so that it would automatically change height as it goes along. The footer again another 100%. Height of this one again is going to be 40 pixels, and the background colour again just to so that we can see the different stripes is going to be white. So we'll just run that again, and you'll see now as we've changed all the style, we now have a nice header colour there. We've got a nice white area which is our main content, our menu, page data which is our content, and then our footer. Now say for example you wanted a different style where you had the menu on the left hand side alongside the content. We just have to make a very quick change to our code. What I'm going to do is put the words clear colon both on the footer. That means that any floating, which is what we're about to do next, is cancelled by the footer. and I'm going to set the width of the menu to 20% first of all, and I'm going to tell it to float alongside the left, and I'm going to do the same with the content. And suddenly, as if by magic, we now actually have a floating website where the menu is actually next to the content, and then you've got the footer underneath it. It's very difficult because of the colour scheme that I've used to see where the menu is and where the content is, but you need to obviously make sure then you use a fixed height on both the menu and the content if you do it that way, otherwise things will look wrong. As I say, I actually don't want to have a floating menu, a left side menu. I'm going to have it as stacked. It's called a stacked format, where you have every item underneath each other. So now I've got my header, menu, content and footer. In my actual master page, I'm just going to write in where the header is. This is the menu. Obviously the content is produced by the actual page itself. Everything else is dealt with by the master page. So now if I save that and just run it, we've got in less than 15 minutes hopefully our basic structure. Looking at it like this, I can see that I actually want my menu to be slightly thinner because it's only going to be text based. I want my footer to be slightly thinner. I also want them both to be centered. So the next items to do is obviously to center the menu, text align center, the footer I want to do the same, and I'm actually going to set the heights on both to being 20 pixels, just like that. And now we have header, menu, page data and a footer. That all looks fine to me so far. Okay, so what comes next? I'm just going to copy the main.master back by clicking the tab and dragging it into being the main section of all the items. Right, the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to actually have it so that the menu only appears when you're not on the default page. And the way I do this is I'm going to go into the toolbox and I'm going to create a panel. So where I've put this is the menu, I've now replaced it with a panel. PN menu I'm going to call it, because this is going to contain all our items. So I don't know what items people will want to have, so all I'm going to do is put in 3 different items: home, stock and finances first of all. Okay. The next thing I'm going to do is add 3 new pages. So we just right click on database driven website, add new item and web form using master page. Now default is going to be a login system, so home is going to be the first page, then we're going to have stock, each time selecting obviously the main.master page by double clicking on it, and then finances. Okay, so we only want people to be able to go onto these pages if they've logged in. So the next thing I'm going to do is put links in to all of these, and as you can see it automatically comes up with the right information. So these now will become hyperlinks, and it will actually be a menu we can select, as I will show in a moment. Obviously I need to change the page that each one of these links to home, stock and finances. Apologies about that, someone just came in asking for some advice on programming, so I had to just pause the video for a moment. Right, let me just refresh where I am up to. Right, okay, I've just created the hyperlinks now for the menu, so if we now play the website, you'll see at the moment my website, as you can see here, it comes up in the tab, and at the moment you've got the menu of items, and I can click on each of these Each one takes me to a different page and the menu appears on each. What we're going to do is we're going to tell the computer to hide this menu, PN menu, if you're not on Home, Stock or Finance. The way we're going to do that is we're going to go to View Code. On the page load event we're going to say if this dot resolve client URL, which is the one that's well, actually, is it just resolve URL? No, actually they're just the resolvings. It's actually the request. See, I told you I wouldn't, because I'm doing it off the top of my head. If I get the URL dot toString, okay, that's the URL of the address of the website that we're going to. If it contains default.aspx, if that is greater than -1, that means if it contains that, pn menu.visible hide the menu, else show the menu. So if I run it now, you'll see that the menu still appears, even though I'm actually on the default page. Or it should do. It might not, it might be clever enough. It does. The reason for that is because this address bar doesn't actually show the words default.aspx. So I'm going to put that in and you'll see the menu actually disappears. So how can we allow it so that even if it is on the default page which is set up as the website, it still won't appear? Well, the way we do that is we say, put another bracket round this, and we use 2 lines which is next to the left shift button. We say if that is greater than -1, or I take the entire content again of this, or if it cannot find the words .aspx, so therefore there is no page listed as a name, it's not going to show the menu. So now you'll see that the menu does not appear when I load the website up, except it is doing. Let's just refresh that. Okay, that's wrong then. So if let me get this and just check. Ooh. This is where I see there might be a problem. So what we're going to do is just debug the code and see what's actually happened. I think it's because it can't do an OR, because one's greater than and one's less than. One's equal to. So what we're going to do is we're going to just check that first of all. So what we do is do a quick watch on that one. That one is equal to false. And that one is equal to false as well, which means that the index of ASPX does not equal, it actually equals 30. So what's the request URL actually looking like? Now the reason therefore is because it has put in the default.aspx, but it's put it as lowercase. Now of course, being case sensitive, we actually need to tell the computer then to use lowercase letters. I knew something would go wrong while I'm recording this. At least it's something minor. Okay, so now if I do too low on each of those, you'll now see it's still appearing, and that would be because my index is not set with a lowercase either. Doing well so far. Okay, let's try it one last time, and we should now find the menu doesn't appear. Thank the Lord. But if I go to home.aspx, it still appears. So home, stock and finances still appear. It will only not appear if the page is in default, which is going to have our login system. So we've got our master page only showing the menu when it needs to show the menu. That's a good starting point. What's next for what we need to do for our database driven website? Well, I think really what we need to do at this stage is add in our database. So I'm just going to right click on main master and say close all but this, and then close that. So we're going to close down our screen and make it nice, neat and tidy. I'm then going to pin my Solution Explorer in. I'm now going to start creating the main main database. How do we do that? Well, first of all we need to have our link, and I'm going to right click on the solution, add new project. This one is going to be a Windows class library, and it's going to be called Data Layer. And Data Layer is going to obviously do everything to connect to the database. Inside my Data Layer is some code, which is this that you're seeing here in front of you. And first of all we're going to start adding some bits of code that we need to. We need to have access to data, so I'm going to use using system.data. To connect to an access database we use OLEDB, so I'm going to put that in as well. And just in case I need it, I'm going to put my input-output information in, so I'm going to call it using system.io. Now I'm going to create a new object called a data connector. Okay, so that's my public class that I'm going to do. And this data connector is going to take a connection string which connects it to a database. Now what I'm going to need is something called a data adapter to connect to my database. So protected OLE data adapter. I'm just going to call it data adapter 1 equals new one of those. So we've got that in memory. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a connection to my database when I create this object. So as I say, I do apologise, I'm actually doing all this from memory and it's not the easiest thing in the world to remember how to do. I'll also need to just set the select command equals new command. What I'm doing now is I'm going to have two commands available, two database commands, a select command and an insert command, because there are four things you can do with a database: select, insert, update and delete. And insert, update, delete all actually do the same thing. So all I'm going to do is set two items, a select command and an insert command, and I'm going to tell it at the moment I haven't got the command I want to give, but I want to use my connection to the database that I'm going to produce in a few moments. So that's actually everything I need to just do for a moment. I'm going to build data layer, check there's no errors, build succeeded. I'm then going to right click on database driven website, add reference, and the reference is projects data layer. That means I can now talk to my data layer from within my database, within my website. So what commands we're going to have? Well, first of all, I'm going to have the ability to select information from the database, and that information is then going to go into a data table. Okay. So I need to create my data table. This is just a way of getting information from a database, and you'll see there's a red line under it because it needs you to return a data table as the object. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another global variable here, public though this time, string error message. So if there's an error in when we connect to the database, we can actually find out what it is. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to put what's called a try-catch loop around the whole lot of this code. So if there's a problem, it will catch the error and won't cause my program to crash, which is kind of important. So how do we actually make this work? Well, the first thing I need to do is set the query to the database. So the first thing I'm going to do is set the command text, which is that bit there for the select command, as our query. I'm then going to open the connection to the database, which I believe is that. Yep. And then going to fill up my data table with the results from that query. So that query might be select everything from a certain table. And then I do need to close my connection. It's really important to close connections, and in fact that's going to be the first thing I'm going to do there as well in my catch, because if you don't close the connection, the database connection will stay open. That means you can't close down your program, you can't close down your database, and no other part of the program can actually access your database either, or make a connection to the database. I'm also going to set the error message being blank, because it means if it's got to this stage here, which I'm highlighting, it means there's been no error. If there has been an error, I obviously want to know what that error is, so I'm going to put the error message in like that as well. So now if there is an error, I can actually check the error message string, and if it contains something, I know there's been an error. If it is blank, it means there's no error. So that's how we're going to do a data select, which actually isn't too difficult, as you can see. The next item I'm going to do, I'm going to take that same structure, copy and paste it. This time I'm going to call it data insert. Now when you insert information, you never actually return a data table, because you're not actually asking for anything to come back from the database. So at this time what I'm going to do is have how many rows have been affected as something that's going to send back. Okay, so we're going to return the result. So we return result if there's been anything updated. We're going to obviously return the number 0 if there's an error message. So this time we're not going to work on the select command, we're also going to work on the insert command. So I'm just going to change all the select commands over to insert command. Now instead of fill on an insert command, what we actually need to do this time is say result equals data adapter 1, trying to remember, insert command, I think it's execute non-query, there we go. What that means is it executes the query that isn't expected to return any information. So this way I set my result from the database, and that will return the number of rows, and obviously my error message is blank as well. So I've now actually completed in just very one fell swoop my insert statement. The data update and data delete I'm actually going to have as items that you can do as well. And what these will actually do, and all that will do, is return data insert. It will just then call the piece of code that's called data insert and run that instead. And I'm going to do that for update and delete. So it just makes life a bit easier. Okay, so that is actually everything we need to do for our data layer. We've now got a database connector, and we don't have to do any more than that, so I'm going to close that down now. The next thing to do obviously is to use Microsoft Access to build a new piece of code. So let's search for Access to build a new database, and all I'm going to do first of all is create a very simple database for logging in. So where I'm going to create that, I need to create a blank database, and now I need to find my folder which actually contains my my website. Now I happen to know that it will be in Visual Studio 2010 projects, and you'll see all the different things that I've been programming in the past. Database driven website, there it is, database driven website, and it's in this folder here that I actually want to do it, and I'm going to call this main data.accdb, and I'm going to then create it. So I now have a database to create. I set the view to design view, and I'm going to create my first table, which is tbl_login. And I'm going to have a user ID, username, password. Very, very simple. The user ID will just be a number that increments. Username I can leave as text, password I can leave as text. That's all fine. And the first username I'm going to create is Chris, password 1234. So that will be my username, password. I'm then going to close Access. That's all I want to do in Access at this moment in time. Right click on database driven website, add existing item. Make sure it's on all files, and then there's my main database. Why do I need to include that? So that I can just check that I can copy it to my output directory. So I right click properties, copy if newer. So now I've got a database to access as well. So now comes the fun part. We actually need to make our connection to the database. So I'm going to double click on default.aspx, which currently says this is the page data. And what I'm going to do now, if I go into design view, because it'll be easier for you guys to understand from this viewpoint rather than me typing a whole load of stuff in code, as much as I like typing stuff in code. Okay, I'm not going to do this very neat. I'm just literally going to have a username and password box. If I was doing this for real, I would be making this neater inside div boxes and things like that, but really I just want to get this functional and don't want you to be too bored listening to me rabbiting on too much. What I'm going to do is create a text box by going into the toolbox, double clicking on text box. I've then hit copy and paste to create a second copy of the text box, and then I'm going to double click on the button control so I have a button as well. Next thing, I'm going to close my Solution Explorer, open my Properties window. If any of these are missing, by the way, Solution Explorer, Properties window, if you click on View on the menu, there's Solution Explorer, and you can go to your Properties pages, etc. Toolbox is there, various other things. So you should be able to find every side panel you might need. Right, I'm going to call my button BN Login and change the text to Login. My username box I'm going to call text username, and my password box I'm going to call text password. Now if I run this website now before I actually do any coding, the one thing you will notice on the password box is that it is in clear view. That means that you can see exactly what you type. So I type in Chris and my password. Oh dear, someone's looking over my shoulder, they can see my password. Now personally and technically I don't mind the fact that password boxes are clear like this, but obviously it's not the usual thing to have done, so what we're going to do is tell the computer not to show the password, and the way we do that is click on password, so we've got the properties window up, go down to single line and change that to password. Now when I run my code, the writing that I type in will be protected, which is kind of useful. So I can do Chris, and I type in my password and it's just dots because I'm in Windows 7 running Internet Explorer. Other browsers will make things a bit different. So now for the code. Now what we're going to do is when we click on login, we're going to check the database, see if that user exists. How do we do that? This is where the fun begins. Okay, so we've got our data layer. If we start typing data layer, you'll see it comes up with brackets, and we have this thing called a data connector. I'm going to give my data connector the name DAT. Now I've got to give it a connection string. Now this really will test my memory. Provider equals, it's Microsoft, and it's a .ace. That means so far that I want to connect to an OLEDB database. In this case, it's actually Access, ACE, Access Control Enterprise or something, I don't know, something like this. It's a version 12 database. Then I've got to tell it what the data source is. Now normally, I could just write the name of the file, but because this is a website, no, keep it. I'm going to need to map it from the server, so I'll do that bit in a minute and show you what I'm going to do. I don't want to persist security, so I think it's info equals false. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to tell it where my database is, and to do that I just do server.mapPath and then the name of the database, which in this case I called, don't tell me, main data. Okay, so that should now be our connection string to our object. So I'm afraid you will have to copy that out, so I'll just show it on the screen so you can pause it. And there we go. So what do we do next? Well, the next thing we do is create ourselves a data table. Now at the moment we can't create a data table because I need to put using system.data on the top there. Now it knows what a data table is, which is useful. I can create a new data table like that. And what we're going to do is now call our database, so it's be data select, and the query, in fact actually I can do this all in one line. Right, data select, I'm going to select user ID from table login, that was the name of my table, where username equals that and password equals that. And the text for the username comes from text box called textUsername.text. And the text for the password comes from textPassword.text. I'm then going to say if dt.rows.count is greater than 0, if one result or more is returned from the database, that must mean our username password has been found. And what I'm going to do is response.redirect, and I'm going to redirect to the home page, home.aspx, which means it's going to load up the home page. Now I'm going to do this twice because there's a reason for that, which you'll see in a minute. First of all, we'll just check our code actually works, which is quite a useful thing to check. So 1, 2, 3, 4, I log in and it goes to the website, goes and checks, and as you can see it's now gone to the home page and I've got the menu. But there is a problem. There is something that all programmers need to be aware of, and to show you it, I'm going to have to show you what the password is. There is a way of breaking into any SQL based database by doing something called a SQL injection attack. This is something you have to make sure that you protect against when you build a website. As a professional web developer, it's every person's fear, because it's the easy way of breaking into a website and getting access to every person's details. If I was to, for example, now I know the password's 1234, but say I'm a hacker and I was to type something like that in and then hit login, suddenly I still have access even though I didn't know that person's password. The SQL injection attack can be protected against, which you'll be happy to know, and that's what we're going to do next to make sure nobody can actually break into our database. So how do we do that? What we're going to do is, after text and username.text, we're going to say we want to replace any single quote. Can you see I've put a single quote in bracket in double speech marks there with two single quotes next to each other. So that means if you write the single quote in your text box, it will be turned into two single quotes next to each other. That is really important. That is what prevents an SQL injection attack from being able to strike your website. So now what will happen is I try and type in and break in again, and this time it doesn't let me through, as it shouldn't do, until I type my password 1234. So I know I'm protected against SQL injection attacks, and I know my password system works. I'm just going to set the properties again from text mode from single line to password. It was only to show you that I wasn't typing the password in and was instead attacking my own database. And anything else that you might need to do, I shall do in future videos, but that should get you guys all started in building your very first database driven website.